And as a matter of fact, the cornerstone of my new plan was Barnabas. Nothing more could be done through the servants. Sortini's messenger was not to be found and would never be found. Sortini and his messenger with him seemed to be receding further and further. By many people, their appearance and names were already forgotten, and I often had to describe them at length, and in spite of that, learned nothing more than that the servant I was speaking to could remember them with an effort, but except for that, could tell nothing about them. As for my conduct with the servants, of course I had no power to decide how it might be looked on, and could only hope that the castle would judge it in the spirit I did it in, and that in return, a little of the guilt of our family would be taken away. But I received no outward sign of that. Still, I stuck to it, for so far as I was concerned, I saw no other chance of getting anything done for us in the castle. But for Barnabas, I saw another possibility. From the tales of the servants, if I had the inclination, and I had only too much inclination, I could draw the conclusion that anyone who was taken into the castle service could do a great deal for his family. But then, what was there that was worthy of belief in these tales? It was impossible to make certain of that, but that there was very little was clear. For when, say, a servant that I would never see again, or that I would hardly recognize, even were I to see him again, solemnly promised me to help to get my brother a post in the castle, or at least, if Barnabas should come to the castle on other business, to support him, or at least to back him up. For according to the servant stories, it sometimes happens that candidates for posts become unconscious or deranged during the protracted waiting, and then they're lost if some friend doesn't look after them. When things like that, and a great many more, were told to me, they were probably justified as warnings, but the promises that accompanied them were quite baseless. But not to Barnabas. It's true, I warned him not to believe them, but my mere telling of them was enough to enlist him for my plan. The reasons I advanced for it myself impressed him less. The thing that chiefly influenced him was the servant stories. And so in reality, I was completely thrown back upon myself. Amalia was the only one who could make herself understood to my parents. And the more I followed, in my own way, the original plans of my father, the more Amalia shut herself off from me. Before you or anybody else, she talks to me, but not when we're alone. To the servants in the Herrenhof, I was a plaything which in their fury they did their best to wreck. Not one intimate word have I spoke with any of them during those 2 years. I've had only cunning or lying or silly words from them. So only Barnabas remained for me, and Barnabas was still very young. When I saw the light in his eyes as I told him those things, a light which has remained in them ever since, I felt terrified, and yet I didn't stop. The things at stake seemed too great. I admit I hadn't my father's great, though empty plans. I hadn't the resolution that men have. I confined myself to making good the insult to the messenger, and only asked that the actual modesty of my attempt should be put to my credit. But what I had failed to do by myself, I wanted now to achieve in a different way, and with certainty through Barnabas. We had insulted a messenger and driven him into a more remote bureau. And what was more natural than for us to offer a new messenger in the person of Barnabas, so that the other messenger's work might be carried on by him, and the other messenger might remain quietly in retirement as long as he liked, for as long a time as he needed, to forget the insult. I was quite aware, of course, that in spite of all its modesty, there was a hint of presumption in my plan, that it might give rise to the impression that we wanted to dictate to the authorities how they should decide a personal question, or that we doubted their ability to make the best arrangements, which they might have made long before we had struck upon the idea that something could be done. But then I thought again that it was impossible that the authorities should misunderstand me so grossly, or if they should, that they should do so intentionally, that, in other words, all that I did should be turned down in advance without further examination. So I did not give in, and Barnabas's ambition kept him from giving in. In this term of preparation, Barnabas became so uppish that he found that cobbling was far too menial work for him. A future bureau employee, yes. He even dared to contradict Amalia, and flatly, on the few occasions that she spoke to him about it. I didn't grudge him this brief happiness, for with this first day that he went to the castle, and his happiness and arrogance would be long gone, a thing easy enough to foresee. And now began the parody of service of which I've told you already. It was amazing with what little difficulty Barnabas got into the castle that first time, or more correctly, into the bureau, which in a manner of speaking has become his workroom. This success drove me almost frantic at the time. When Barnabas whispered the news to me in the evening after he came home, I ran to Amalia, seized her, drew her into a corner, and kissed her so wildly that she cried with pain and terror. I could explain nothing for excitement, and then it had been so long since we had spoken to each other, so I put off telling her until next day or the day after. For the next few days, however, there was really nothing more to tell. After the first quick success, nothing more happened. For 2 long years, Barnabas led this heartbreaking life. The servants failed us completely. I gave Barnabas a short note to take with him, recommending him to their consideration, reminding them at the same time of their promises. And Barnabas, as often as he saw a servant, drew out the note and held it up. And even if sometimes may have presented it to someone who didn't know me, and even if those who did know me were irritated by his way of holding out the note in silence, for he didn't dare to speak up there, yet all the same it was a shame that nobody helped him, and it was a relief which we could have secured, I must admit, by our own action and much earlier, when a servant who had probably been pestered several times already by the note crushed it up and flung it into the wastebasket, almost as if he had said, "That's just what you yourselves do with letters," it occurred to me. But barren of results, as all this time was in other ways, it had a good effect on Barnabas, if one can call it a good thing, that he grew prematurely old, became a man before his time. Yes, even in some ways, more grave and sensible than most men.